Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and delighted to say, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey. Good afternoon, Richard.
Good evening, Jeffrey.
Yes, it's evening for a change, and very sorry, viewers, for being late, later than usual. That's my fault, but I'm sure you'll enjoy this episode. Now, we had promised you an episode about Captain of MH370 Zaharie Shah. However, we have widened this episode to go over what we know about MH370 and what we don't, as so many who have not watched previous episodes are asking the same questions repeatedly. So I want to clarify what is known and what is not. We are going to cover Captain Shah, but in a more limited way, as that subject is very sensitive and we are very respectful of the variety of views. Now, to kick this particular episode off, Richard, can you give us an overview of MH370, please?
Sure. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 on the 8th of March 2014 remains one of aviation's most perplexing mysteries. Captain Zaharie Ahmed Shah, the pilot in command, has been subject of extensive scrutiny, but no definitive official conclusions have been reached. Multiple investigations have been conducted by different authorities in different countries to determine the cause of MH370's disappearance. The final report by the Malaysian Ministry of Transport in 2018 confirmed that the aircraft was manually diverted from its flight path, suggesting intervention by someone in the cockpit. However, the report did not assign blame to any particular individual, stating the possibility of a third party interference in the cockpit could not be ruled out. And of course, several theories have emerged over the years. Around 150 books have been written on MH370, and numerous documentaries have been produced. As of now, Captain Zaharie Ahmed Shah has neither been officially declared guilty nor exonerated in relation to the MH370 incident. The absence of definitive evidence means that the true cause of the plane's disappearance remains speculative. Until more concrete information emerges, the question of his innocence or guilt will remain unresolved. We are, as Jeffrey said, treating this subject matter very carefully because we do not want to upset or shock any viewers. Any air crash is a sensitive event, and we realize discussing a human tragedy like MH370 can well be unsettling for some.
But taking you up on that point about the third party hijacker, Richard, can this scenario be excluded with certainty?
Well, not with certainty, but if this was a third party hijacker, then there were no known demands made by the hijacker, which is unusual. Uh, there have been 1,200 hijackings since 1931 and 553 since 1980, which have been analyzed in some detail. And since the 9/11 tragedy in 2001, airport mandatory passenger security measures have been introduced, and hijackings have been reduced to only 15 in the last 24 years.
Mm,
Now, that's quite a good track record, isn't it?
sure, absolutely.
Now, Of the 583 cases since 1980, 90% of those, there was a demand made by the hijacker. And in the 15 cases since 2001, every time there was a demand made. Sometimes it had political objectives, releasing prisoners, promoting political causes, or seeking asylum. Sometimes financial, requesting ransom money. Sometimes just a destination change, forcing the aircraft to land in another country or location. Sometimes just publicity, gaining media attention for a particular cause or a personal grievance. Now, in the case of MH370, Captain Zaharie Shah was known to have given the last radio message at 17:19:30 UTC, just before passing into Vietnam's airspace. And the aircraft disappeared from the radar screens of air traffic control just 66 seconds later at 17:20:36 UTC. So, in my view, the 66 seconds is not long enough for a third party hijacker to have taken over the aircraft. He would have needed to have entered the cockpit somehow and then overpowered anyone who was trying to prevent him and then take control of the aircraft. And that, coupled with no demands being made, makes, in my view, the hijack scenario highly unlikely. And in fact, when we did a survey of all our viewers, and we had 734 respondents, only 11 out of 734 said it was a hijacker or a stowaway. That's 1.5%. I've said many times that I believe the captain's home flight simulator is a smoking gun, but I have also said many times that I do not have sufficient evidence that a case would stand up in a court of law.
So, what do we know about Captain Zaharie Shah for certain?
Well, we know quite a bit because of the enormous public scrutiny that is carried on
Mm.
and the many investigations. And let me tell you the 10 things we know for certain about Captain Zaharie Shah. And I'd like to point out that I have all of these 10 points in common with Captain Zaharie Shah. He was a family man with grown up kids, and so am I. His children went on to university to study and sometimes abroad, and so have my kids. His oldest son was married, and his daughter studied at Deakin University in Australia and was living in Melbourne in 2014. In my case, all my kids are married and have left home and studied at universities, and two of them even studied abroad. So we have quite a bit of family life in common. And Shah lived in a nice part of town. So do I, fortunately. He had a long standing and successful professional career, and so did I, gratefully. Shah loved aircraft and flying. I'm not a commercial pilot, but I am a private pilot, and I also love aircraft and flying. Shah disdained political corruption, and so do I. He had strong beliefs and opinions, so we have all these points in common. Shah also made YouTube videos as a public service, Jeffrey. There you go. So do I, with you. Shah had all the gadgets, everything from iPhone through to whatever, and I have the same. In fact, I even have two robots at home. Shah was on all the social media platforms, so am I. and he had a lot of friends, and thankfully, so do I. So we have a lot in common, and he has the profile of a normal, happily married guy established in his career.
And I can tick all those 10 boxes as well. So yes, we all have those
Well, there
things
you
in
go.
common. Yeah. So what do we know for sure about what happened to MH370?
Well, we know all the basic facts about the flight and the crew and the passengers and the cargo and the aircraft. We know the timeline of the events. We've found a number of items of physical evidence, the floating debris, which Blaine has talked about at length. We have a number of items of electronic evidence and radar and radio and satellite data, which we've also discussed at some length. And we know all about the various investigations and the various search efforts for MH370.
So now the question is, what don't we know for sure about what happened to MH370?
Well, we're sure that we do not know the reason why MH370 diverted and subsequently disappeared. And we do not know who the perpetrator or perpetrators were. We do not know the precise location where MH370 ended up. We have some idea, but we don't know precisely. And we do not know the motive behind what happened to MH370.
Okay, so what official reports are there into what happened to MH370?
There are quite a number. There are several reports from Malaysia. They include information from Malaysian Airlines, the crew, their personnel record, financial, medical, psychological, social, behavioral, even a voice analysis of the uh, pilot and co-pilot in the cockpit, together with their communications with ATC. We know a lot about the aircraft. We have a list of all the passengers. We know the cargo. We know the fuel. We know the weather. We have all the air traffic control communications. We even have a mobile phone communication. So there's a lot of info, and we have a lot of information from Boeing, even some from Airbus, because they made one of the parts, the flapper on the Boeing. We have a lot of information from investigators like the NTSB or the AAIB or the ATSB or Bayer in France. Even the FBI helped the investigation. We have info from Inmarsat and Thales and other people who supplied systems on board or on the satellite ground station. And there were a number of other accredited representatives from various countries involved in producing the Malaysian reports. And there's a similar story from Australia. There are several reports, and the ATSB, AMSA, Cicero, DSTG, Curtin University, all involved. And again, NTSB, FBI, AAIB, Bayer in France, Boeing, Inmarsat, and Thales were involved. So a lot of data out there and lengthy reports. And there are also several reports on the floating debris and drift analyses by Cicero and UWA, the University of Western Australia, Geomar in Germany, Met Ocean, NOAA from America, CMEMS and CMCC have all produced drift analyses from the floating debris that have been found. And there are several reports on hydroacoustic analysis from Curtin University, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and Cardiff University in the UK. So a lot of
A lot
information
of
out there.
There's an enormous amount of data that's been compiled and research that's been done. It's amazing. So you mentioned some universities. What academic research has also been done on MH370?
Yeah, well, apart from the universities I've already mentioned, Miami University in Florida and Berlin University in Germany did a joint drift study and concluded the crash was around 25 degrees south.
Mm.
Uh, Texas A&M and in the USA did an impact analysis and concluded a near vertical dive at impact. The University of California at Davis and the University of South Florida in the USA did a joint study on the barnacles, and we've talked about them in a previous episode. Sadly, in that case, the French authorities would not release any barnacles for the University of California and University of South Florida study. But they believe they could tell within 50 to 100 miles along the seventh arc where the crash location of MH370 is. So it would be nice if the French authorities were to spare a couple of barnacles for that study.
Mm.
Then Liverpool University in the UK are analysing the work we have done on Whisper as a form of passive radar. And Aalto University in Finland and Linköping University in Sweden have also both analyzed the BTO and BFO Inmarsat satellite data using Bayesian and least square statistical methods.
Wow. Well, this just goes on and on. But there's also a number of independent researchers that have published analyses as well, isn't there?
Yeah, a long list, and they have been recognized. For
Mm.
example, the ATSB acknowledged Duncan Steele, Mike Exner, Victor Unello, Don Thompson, Simon Hardy, Bobby Ullich, Robin Stevens, Blaine Gibson, and myself.
Mm.
And Ocean Infinity has acknowledged Simon Maskell from University of Liverpool, Frederick Gustafsson from the University of Linköping, Santiago Cortes from the University of Aalto in Finland, Captain Patrick Blelly, Jean-Luc Marchand, again Victor Unello and Bobby Ullich, and Captain Andrew Banks, and myself. So a lot of people have got involved as independent researchers.
So here we go. What is your conclusion? Can we rule out a hijacker, a fire, a technical problem, a pilot error?
Well, in my view, you can rule out all the frequent causes of an aircraft crash because the aircraft carried on flying for 7 hours and 37 minutes until fuel exhaustion.
Mm.
So I do not believe there was a pilot error in aviating, navigating, or fuel management of the aircraft. I don't believe there was a mechanical failure due to a fire or explosion or decompression. There was no bad weather reported. There was no controlled flight into terrain. There was no mid-air collision. There was no bird strike or foreign object damage. There was no sabotage or terrorism or third party hijacking, in my view. The maintenance and the ground handling were correctly done. There weren't any ATC errors. And there are no known design flaws or manufacturing defects with the aircraft. So, we've covered all of the usual suspects.
So what are we left with?
Yeah, well, we just eliminated
Everything.
97% of the causes behind aircraft crashes, um, but there are a few extremely rare events left. There is a possibility of an automation failure, like Air France 447, and we did an episode on that. There's a possibility of crew sabotage, like Silk Air 185 or German Wings 9525, and we did an episode on Silk Air. There's a possibility of military conflict or an accidental shoot down. And on Sunday, we are doing an episode on MH370 and Korean Airlines 007. There's the possibility of cargo shifting or dangerous goods like ValueJet 592 that crashed in Florida. And finally, there's a possibility of space weather or radiation uh, causing an issue like the SAS Flight 751 or the Qantas 72 flight over northwest Australia. So we're down to the 3% of the extremely rare events.
Yes. Although some of those events can be discounted because the plane flew for 7 hours and 37 minutes. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So it wasn't shot down.
no,
Uh,
no.
it it did keep flying until the fuel was exhausted. So
Mm,
highly unlikely there were dangerous goods which caused a fire.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
and the chances of it being hit by a meteorite or in the middle of the southern Indian Ocean being affected by a superpower transmitter somewhere are exceedingly remote.
We might leave it there in our analysis of this perplexing tragedy. And but of course, we're going to delve further into all of this, um, and we would love to get viewers' thoughts on it all. I'd love to get your comments, and we'll come back tomorrow, Richard, to take those comments on this particular episode. Correct?
Sure. And
Yeah,
look forward to uh, any questions and comments that people would like to make.
sure. So, viewers, that's all we've got time for because I've got to get this episode up before midnight. Um, Thank you for tuning in. Please forgive the delay in getting this episode to you. Please subscribe to us. Please like us. Please keep those comments coming. And Richard, thank you very much indeed for all your work on this episode. And we'll be back tomorrow to answer your questions. And we'll be back on Sunday with the plane guys, looking at KE007 and MH370, those two tragic shoot downs. So thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
Thank you, viewers.